Welcome back, everyone, to another Thursdays Through the Page. This is the reading vlog of the books that I read for the month of October. Let's start off with this page here. This is another one of those prompts. Books that changed my life. I read a book one day and my whole life was changed. Arun Pamuk, who wrote The New Life. So I didn't really fill out the entire page because these are just a couple of the books that have changed my life for the better, but in subtle ways. So let's start off with the first one. This is The Art of the Hunchback of Notre-Dame. How did this book change my life? Well, reading this book gave me further insight and research into how an animation film is made. But I loved reading the backstory of how many artists, the original author, Victor Hugo, and his inspiration managed to create a 200,000 word manuscript with a single bottle of ink. So if you can imagine, this is a bottle of ink here. Now, can you imagine using this to write 200,000 words? For a 200,000 word manuscript. That's how poor Victor Hugo really was before his book, The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, was published. Another book that changed my life, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Bradbury was ahead of his time. His story is a prophetic forerunner of what we're facing now. It made me venture really into the world of sci-fi. So that's why this book really stands out. There are several more, but I have yet to think of the other titles that come to my mind at the moment, so let's move on. Okay, so let's start off with the first book of the month that I read for the reading challenge. I read this within a couple of hours. This is my personal favorite children's story. Kate DiCamillo's The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. As you can see, some of the pages are still flagged because I've yet to write the rest of them down. So I read this on October 14th. Moving a little closer. I give the cover a 4, but I didn't really do it for the cover. I think I just wanted to read a whole bunch of books by Kate DiCamillo at the time, and I read this book years ago. I give the cover a 4 because if you look closely, this is, as you can see, it says The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. So it looks like a real rabbit walking towards the front door of somewhere, possibly a home or maybe to a place of his destiny. So I based it on the PopSugar Reading Challenge task, a book with a rabbit on the cover. So there we are. Why I chose this book. I read this book before, and it's, to me, like I said, it's the best children's book that I ever read. I think this is a young adult novel. Definitely geared towards elementary. Other books of Kate DiCamillo I read The Tale of Despera, which was turned into a film. Tiger Rising, it was interesting. I just wish I was more into the story. Now, these are the other ones I haven't read yet. The Magician's Elephant, which was made into a film for Netflix. It looks so cool to see. And then I believe this is her latest one called The Puppets of Spellhorst. They look really interesting. The feeling this book evoked in me. So, for those of you who don't know the story of Edward Tulane, it's almost like, take for instance, The Adventures of Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, but imagine Pinocchio as a rabbit who can't talk, who cannot move, who does not magically come to life. He's basically a porcelain doll who is so fragile. He's dressed to the nines, and he's treated so respectfully by his human, Abilene, but he never really understood what love is. So, as he goes through these trials and struggles of trying to make his way back home after an accidental fight between two boys on a ship where the family is going away, he's tossed overboard, and he goes on all these adventures, but during those adventures, he suffers heartache and helplessness. Edward takes us with him as he tries desperately to communicate with others, those who save him and those who treat him with such, well, as trash, basically. Like he's a porcelain rabbit that has no particular value. Favorite passages. So Pellegrina, you could say, is I want to call her, well, she's the grandmother to Abilene, but I would say she's almost like, she represents the witch in the story that she tells to her granddaughter. Here she asks, how can a story end happily where there is no love? Now, after about 100 pages in, Edward Tulane, who has been through so much, it says here, Edward knew what it was like to say over and over again the names of those he left behind. He knew what it was like to miss someone. And so he listened, and in listening, his heart opened wide, and wider still. Did this book change me in any way? It just reminds me to keep my heart open again, even when it's breaking, because I've been through some really emotional, well, I went through some emotional trauma, and I'm waiting to, I'm waiting to be justified for it. Who would I like to share this book with? Well, I've mentioned him before, Andrew Garfield, because earlier I mentioned him in the books that keep on giving. Who would I give this book to? I would give it to him because his mom, his late mother Lynn, identified herself with the rabbit, and he wears this beautiful rabbit ring that reminds him of her all the time. So, and plus where they were living at the time, I mean, I guess his father still lives in the same house in Surrey. But they had rabbits in their garden, and Lynn would love, every morning she would go out looking for them. So something like that. What would I hope for him to take away from it? Or what would I hope for them, whoever else that you would think to give this book to? Don't be afraid to fall in love again and to give love a chance. That's what I would say. So this is the second time I've reread this book. So the writing style, I loved it. The message was great. And the reading experience gets me every time. But as one who enjoys a good cry, make sure to have the tissues ready. This book isn't, this prompt isn't written down. The genre hound, romance. I haven't really read a lot of romance stories. I've read like a few love stories here and there, like A Walk to Remember by Nicholas Sparks, The Wednesday Letters, but I can't really say that they're favorites. I've actually read stories where there is romance in them, so I don't know. I'll need to look back and see which books fit that category. Let's move on to the next one. So speaking of Andrew Garfield, we have another one that I definitely would recommend for everyone. If you are in a state of flux, when you wake up in the morning, and what is the first thing you do? What is the first thing that you are so passionate about doing that you love to do first? You're probably destined to do whatever that is, whether it is when you wake up in the morning and you want to sing, well, then you're supposed to sing. If you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is write, well, then you're a writer. If you wake up in the morning and you want to educate the world, guess what? You're meant to be a teacher. So think about that. So this is the book that I would say changed my life. This is Rainer Maria Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, with his collection of poetry called The Possibility of Being. So I read this from October 18th to the 29th. As you can see, if you want to surprise me for my birthday, get me Post-it notes or these plastic flags. I always use those all the time. I give the cover a 4. I didn't really pay attention to the illustration in the back because the title stands out, but if you look closely, it looks like there's a handwritten letter. And then, if you look even closer, these are glasses placed upside down, which I never noticed that before. So, let's take a look into this incredible, well, I call this my Bible, basically. So, what drew me to the cover? It was the title. Because it reminded me of that clip from Sister Act 2 after Sister Mary Clarence gives the book to Rita. And Rita's basically like a lost soul who wants to sing, but because her mom is a no-nonsense, singing is dead, it has no security, so don't bother with it. But Sister Mary Clarence, who's played by Whoopi Goldberg, tells her about the book and gives it to her to read. So, I saw so I want to say it's been over 20 years when I bought this book, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I got this at Barnes & Noble because it was at bargain price. I took the price tag off some time ago, but I remember seeing this, and that clip of the film just came back in a flash, and I had to get it. I'm like, okay, what are you all about? What is the magic behind this book? So it's amazing how, like, certain things that you see in films will push you to get the book that character read. For instance, if you are a fan of British television and British romantic series, my favorite romantic series is As Time Goes By, with the late Sir Geoffrey Palmer and the great Dame Judi Dench. And because Lionel, after he moves in with Jane, he begins to bring a lot of these books back home to read. So he read Winnie the Pooh, he read Tom Brown's School Days. So I never read those books, although I did read Winnie the Pooh, and Winnie the Pooh is a children's book. I couldn't get into it for some reason. I love the cartoons, but for some reason the stories just didn't do anything for me. So I have yet to read Moss on the Floss, that was mentioned in that was seen in the series. I've yet to read Tom Brown's School Days, and I've yet to read Moby Dick, that he also read. So moving on to the next prompt here. So why I chose this book? It's part of the book reading challenge. So a book you read more than 10 years ago. Well, it's been more than 10 years. I have not read any other books by this author. The feelings that this book evoked in me, inspiration and hope that I can affirm my passion first thing when I rise. So there are so many pages flagged in here, but I want to get to basically the get-go of what the book is about. So let me just read this one to you. There is only one way. Go within. Search for the cause. Find the impetus that bids you to write. Then draw near to nature. Pretend you are the very first man, and then write what you see and experience, what you love and lose. So basically, in Letters to a Young Poet, this Mr., I believe his name is Mr. Capus, I hope I said that name right, writes to Rilke from a military school, which, according to the book, Rilke was in the military school, but he was sickly. He was treated as like a type of undesirable, kind of like Desmond Doss in Hacksaw Ridge. So he never really fit in with military life, and he catered more to writing. And so and after a bunch of his poetry is published, this student, Mr. Capus, writes to Rilke and asks him to take a look at his poetry. And Rilke writes to him in 10 letters. They sort of start this beautiful correspondence. And Rilke is telling him, like it said in that clip from Sister Act, do not ask me to read your writing, because when you rise in the morning and the first thing you do is to find the source of why you write, well, then guess what? you're supposed to write. But he gives them advice on not just what to write, but how to write, to find that type of inspiration. And he also recommends other books that to this military student to read, to find a source of inspiration. Did reading this book change me in any way? I consider this my real Bible. The impetus to wake up in the morning and do the first thing that you love, well, doing the first thing that I love. And, yeah. I've yet to figure out what I love to do in the morning. I love creating stories. I love doing junk journaling. I love creating art. And I love reading. So, and of course I love watching, television first thing in the morning. So how do I mix in all those passions of mine and make it a thing, make it something to work in my favor? Who would I like to share this book with? Well, I put down Andrew Garfield because he does mention Letters to a Young Poet in his interview with his roommate Eddie Redmayne. But I'm not sure if he's ever read The Possibility of Being. These poems are absolutely beautiful. But I also would want to share this with my friend Jessie. Like I said, I'm unsure if Andrew's read The Possibility of Being, but for my friend, it's to help her discover her true calling when she wakes up in the morning. So she's still trying to find her way in life at this moment in time. So I wish her the best, and I hope she finds that calling. Reread it, of course. The writing style, message, and reading experience, as you can see, loved it all. Now, this book is not part of the reading challenge list, but I actually wrote to the author because I read her book, Dance of the Dolphin, years ago when I was studying to be an adult bat mitzvah, and we were supposed to have our interview, and then the Israel-Hamas war conflict broke out. So we're postponing it, and I'm hoping to interview her soon. She's definitely one of my favorite authors at this time. So her book, the book that I chose to write down that I finished, is called God Whispers, Stories of the Soul, Lessons of the Heart, and this is by Rabbi Kedar. So I read this in 2 days, from the 29th to the 30th. I would give the cover a 3. It's more about the title, to be honest. It looks like there's a flower on this. But because she's a rabbi, I was very surprised to find this. I'm not sure if you can see it. It looks like an embossed sticker with a cross. And I thought to myself, well, what in the world is... I never noticed that before until I actually started reading the book. But I'm looking at it going, what is that doing on there? So let me show you what I found in the back. No, that's before that. And there's a bunch of these beautiful... Yes, here it is. So this is about Jewish Lights Publishing. So this is what they had to say. People of all faiths and backgrounds yearn for books that attract, engage, educate, and spiritually inspire. So our principal goal is to stimulate thought and help all people learn about who the Jewish people are, where they come from, and what the future can be made to hold. While people of our diverse Jewish heritage are the primary audience, our books speak to people in the Christian world as well, and will broaden their understanding of Judaism and hopefully others, and the roots of their own faith. So, I love that. Because of what's happening right now. A lot of anti-Semitism threats going around, and it's scary. So the author, the cover not so much, but was surprised, like I said, it was surprised to see a golden cross on it. Why I chose this book. I wanted to read Rabbi Kedar's books, all of them that she had read. All of them that she had written, and I asked if she could be a guest for my podcast. And I read her book years ago when I was a member at my own temple. So the only other book I've read from hers besides this one recently was entitled Dance of the Dolphin. She uses the word, she uses the term dance a lot as a type of metaphor in the books that she's written so far, because we're in this constant dance of struggle. And for Dance of the Dolphin, to put it simply, well, what happens when we for those of us who have been blessed, I would say, to actually be so close to dolphins or to see them jumping in and out of the water, why do they do that? Well, dolphins cannot breathe underwater, so they have to come up for air every 18 to 20 minutes. So they're dancing between the world below the ocean and the world above. So it's the same thing that happens with us. We're caught between the world of earth and the world of heaven above. So we're in this constant struggle to find ourselves. We're dancing between two worlds. That even goes through with when I was learning about when I was taking a class on kinesiology. It was actually Tai Chi, and Tai Chi is also a dance. You're bringing the energy from the earth and you're bringing the energy from the air, and it's this dance that is kind of like a yin and yang that are working opposites, but they're also working together to balance things out. So that's basically what this is, balancing this dance of struggle as we live our lives. The other books that I haven't read from hers yet are Omer. This is the latest one she wrote. Our Dance with God and The Bridge to Forgiveness. The feelings that this book evoked in me, I didn't write that down. I'm struggling right now with my own spirituality because I'm not really that much in faith. But like in the words of Mel Brooks, I'm sorry, Mel Bush, listen to me. In the words of Mel Brooks, I'm not that faithful. I don't really have a lot of faith, but I consider myself terribly Jewish. I'm with you, Mel. So let's just take a look at some of these passages here. To embark on a spiritual journey, we must engage in two dances. There's that word again. One lessens fear, and one expands moments of love and connectedness. Now, this is interesting. She was she was an English literature major in college. She had something really interesting to say about irony and juxtaposition. Let's take a look. I was in love with irony, metaphor, juxtaposition, and paradox. This is something that a lot of English literature students struggle with when they're learning about these terms the first time. But this is interesting what she had to say about it. Irony has meaning. Juxtaposition is revealing. Every character in fiction or in our life is there for a reason. So I thought about that, and I'm looking at some of the characters in fiction that were embodied in film by famous actors. So as an example, let's take the event of 9/11. The day afterwards, there was a call to come to our temple for all members. Now, usually when we were there, everyone was hustling, bustling, everyone was talking at the same time until the rabbi showed up. But that Wednesday, on September 12th, 2001, there was nothing but dead silence in the entire temple. It was like we were all hit. We were all thrown a curveball that came out of left field, and we didn't see it coming. And it was just like everyone was in the state of shock and utter disbelief. And we had 3 rabbis at the time, and they all had something to say. But it was this one rabbi, this wonderful, positive thinker. He tied in the story of the Lord of the Rings. And of course, that particular year, It was the first installment of Lord of the Rings and the first installment of the Harry Potter series, but he catered to the Lord of the Rings. And the character Gandalf is played by Sir Ian McKellen, who is a brilliant, incredible actor of versatility. And his character, he brought something to the character of Gandalf that I'm not sure if any other actor would have done him justice. But the rabbi was saying something in that scene where the fellowship, the 9 members of the fellowship, are stuck in the mines of Moria, and they're being followed by Gollum. And of course, Frodo Baggins is the ring bearer. The ring is a heavy burden. It's so precious to bear. And Frodo says, "I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish that none of this had happened." And Gandalf turns to him and he says, "So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to do now is to decide what to do with the time that is given to us." So imagine, Tolkien wrote the story because he was involved with, he lost a lot of his friends in World War II. And can you imagine, you have the British army, you have the Americans, you have the Russians, you have the French resistance, all separate countries, all diverse cultures, each have their own differences, past regressions, past former enemies. And can you imagine, they have to come together like the Fellowship to stop this army, to finish this war, to end it before before there are any more casualties. Another character that comes to mind is the character of Dorothy Lintott, who was played by the great Francis de la Tour. But the play had to be written first by Alan Bennett. Now, even though he's a man, he's giving the only female history teacher her dues. And Dorothy, I'm not sure if you understand. I'm not sure, for those of you who have read the play, The History Boys, it was made into a film with the original cast. And Dorothy Lintott, she and the boys they're doing like a practice round for interviews with the Dons, or basically the recruiters. And there's this scene where she's looking at the boys going, "I really know what's going on here. It's because I'm the only woman in this room." And she gets up and she tells them, do you know how disgusting it feels to be the only woman here? That I am forced as a history teacher to teach 5 centuries of masculine ineptitude. In other words, masculine stupidity. And she basically tells these boys, history is a commentary on the various and continuing incapabilities of men. What is history? Because as teachers, I'm sure for every subject, teachers are the first thing I believe they're supposed to ask their students, how do you define English? How do you define art? How do you define history? How do you define math, science, whatnot? How do you define theater? And I don't think that any student has ever asked their teacher, well, how do you define it? So here, Dorothy gets a chance to tell these boys what she thinks is history. What is history? History is women following behind with a bucket. I remember, I started teaching the year in the fall of 2016, and election night was the same night as the graduation. And of course, in the polls, I prefer to refer to him as he who must not be named in the White House, because he's on trial right now with a bunch of gag orders. And I'm just going to say my own little stint. Everyone's minds that night, it seemed like no one was focused on the students. Everyone was focused on the election. People were so scared of this guy, and the polls were not looking good. So can you imagine? It was just going to be, I call it the long night. And the next morning I wake up and he was elected president. I'm sitting there completely dumbfounded, and I go in. Most of the teachers are shocked, but not really, not surprised. And my colleague said to me, it does not matter who's president. It does not matter who is president. We still have a job to do. Our job is to come in and educate. But I remember that particular day I was helping a few of my students who were in my class outside, because during that time I not only taught classes, but I was also an independent study teacher. So my time would be at my own cubicle with a couple of tables so students can gather around, students who were assigned to me. And some of these students were assigned to me, but some of them were also my own students from the English class. And the sister of one of our staff members was sitting at the table, and we were all talking about the election. And I just happened to say that line from the play, "History is women following behind with a bucket." She took one look at me and burst into tears. And she said to me, "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." And it reminds me of what Oprah Winfrey's encounter with Tess Hooker years ago. And of course, Tess Hooker comes 30 plus years later to the show and surprises Oprah. She says, "It doesn't matter who you say it to. You just say it." Because you never know when a simple line like that or something you say can change people's lives. Did reading this book change me in any way? Not at the moment, but in reading it, it's a constant reminder that the divine spirit is somewhere close by, even in a cloud of my own despair, which, with what's happening with America right now, we're all in this cloud of despair, and we're wondering, where is God when we need him? Or where is God when we need her? Or where are the gods when we need them? Whatever religion you believe in, whatever faith is yours. Who would I like to share this book with? My girlfriend Jess. What would I hope for them? Well, it's also what I would hope for myself. Listen for the divine whispers. We are both in constant doubt of just about everything every day, and we need to just stop, breathe, and listen for the stillness. Listen for that still small voice that is the divine himself or herself, whoever that is. I would recommend it. I haven't reread this book, but in going back through all these flags, I'm going to reread what I flagged down. So I want to say the writing style, the message, and the reading experience, I loved it. And now I've yet to find and discover and listen for the divine whispers. So I wish you all well. Please keep those that are still in conflict in your hearts and your prayers, and I will see you all next time. Keep on reading.